welcome to a very special episode of Broad Street Hustle. I am your guest host tonight, Jimmy the Chalk, and we have a special NFL draft only episode with a once in a lifetime panel. We know you're going to be thrilled. Just a quick scheduling update. We'll be back with our normal show later in the week, but with the Sixers playing Thursday night and the NFL draft Thursday night, we wanted to get some content out there before. So this draft episode specifically is being recorded Tuesday night for anybody that's listening to this down the way in case any news breaks early Wednesday. But we'll be back later this week with some Sixers and Phillies thoughts. Joining me tonight is one of our regular co-hosts, Christopher Michael Meeker. Meeker, how's it going?
What's up, Chalky?
And joining us tonight for the first time is special guest, Eagle Rob. Rob, what's going on?
Feels good to be here. Thank you.
And joining us again, I haven't kept track of how many times, but to this point, he is the first and hopefully only Cockroach Cowboys fan that will ever participate in this podcast. Our old friend, Walt. Walt, what's going on?
What's going on, Chalk? Thanks for having me.
Thanks
The
for coming back.
star of the show.
Yeah, we never broke out the Walt metric as far as the ratings go, but we'll have to look into that. As I mentioned, this is going to be a episode focused only on the NFL draft. It kicks off Thursday night. Just to give you the folks a little idea how it's going to go. The guys drafted earlier today. And with our three panelists, we're just going to go in an order, and each guy takes a team in that order and who they would pick based on the board that was available at that time and what they think the needs of that team are. But before we get into that, real quickly, do you guys have any thoughts or impressions, on this year's draft or just the draft process in general? It's become such a big deal over the years compared to what it was when it was just in a ballroom in Manhattan back in the day. So any impressions on the draft overall, or in particularly this draft year? Meeker, we can start with you.
I mean, I think most people are going to say that this is a rich draft for quarterbacks, a rich draft for wide receivers, a rich draft for offensive linemen. I think, I listened to a lot of podcasts on the draft before this show, and a lot of GMs have been on these podcasts, former GMs, not current GMs, because I don't think any current GM wants to go on a podcast and tell you what they're thinking. But the way that they think about this, they cluster positions and cluster, what their board would say. And they have their needs, obviously, that they're looking at. And they're saying, okay, we're going to take these four guys. We think they belong in whatever section of the draft that we believe their draft grade would put them at. And if they're there when we pick, that's our guy. Some of these teams will go with best player available. Some will go with need. There's a lot of teams in the NFL that have a lot of needs. So get to the back end of the draft. Okay, you're going to take, best player available. But for the most part, I think this year, more than any year that I've seen, we're going to see a lot of offensive linemen go in the first round.
Well, thoughts or impressions or any commentary you want to add about this year's draft or the draft process in general?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with the quarterbacks at the top, they're the jumping off points. Everybody's going to have a board with best available consensus, but obviously there's landmines early with as early as 2. I mean, what Washington doing? Anyone 2 through 8 could probably make a case for trading down. Obviously, you need a partner, but you have 4 quarterbacks. So, I mean, is it going to hit? Is a landmine going to hit as early as 2? Is it going to hit in succession? And then the draft will level out into needs and best player available. But when these landmines hit, are they in succession? Are they spaced out? You got somebody like McCarthy, who he's 25th on most people's big boards, but he's a quarterback, and that quarterback tax has driven him into the top 5 seemingly. So it's just a matter of the intrigue is, when do these landmines hit? They're going to hit. It's just a matter of when and who's impacted by them. So that's why it makes it must-see TV, because anything can happen, really. We could do this board, and it's just for entertainment, really.
Yeah, and the chaos factor is always one of the more intriguing parts of the night. Is when do the boards start blowing up? And last year you could argue it happened as early as 2 because the word out prior to the day or two before the draft was that Houston had no interest in Stroud, and Meeker was one of the few people that got the first 3 right in order last year, although he didn't have Houston trading back up for Anderson. Chaos can happen at any point. That always makes it a little interesting. Rob, anything you want to add or anything you're looking forward to going into this year's draft?
What Meeker said about offensive line. It's considered a rich draft for tackles,
But there's a lot of guys in this first round that played left tackle that aren't going to play left tackle in the NFL. I look at every guy that's rated in first round area, there's two pure left tackles to me. And that's the top two that are going to go up the board. Joe Walt, that's the surefire, and the kid from Penn State, Fashanu, who's got a little more work as a pure left tackle. Then you look down at some of the other guys, like Graham Barton, played left tackle at Duke. He's going to probably play center in the end. Troy Fatano, there's questions whether he could play left tackle in the NFL for various reasons, athleticism-wise. People think he should kick inside the guard. Fuaga, same thing. So I don't think it's as rich as sure. There's not a lot of sure thing left tackles in the first quarterbacks. Would anybody be surprised? Just take Caleb Williams out for a second. Would anybody be shocked if 3 years from now, Bo Nix was a better pro than Jaden Daniels? I wouldn't be that shocked. Or Penix better than Daniels?
Yeah, I don't really like Daniels' profile, to be honest with you, but he's still going to take in the top
He takes a lot of hits.
Yeah.
For me, I think one of the more interesting things is when you guys touched on it, but we say it again and again, it's an offensive driven league. But if you look at the big boards and you look at these projections, if they play out the way people are guessing, you might have one defensive player taken in the top 10. And if that happens, I went 30 years back. It's never happened in the last 30 years. There's been at least 2 defensive players taken in the top 10 every year. Going back to 94, I stopped at that point because I didn't have enough time. But we'll see what happens when we get to the draft boards for you guys. So let's get moving. We got 32 picks to get through, so we'll get right into it. Rob, you got the first slot, so you have the all important and difficult selection of guessing who the Chicago Bears will take at number 1.
I've been trying to get into their head for days. Now, I say it's going to be Caleb Williams, but a quick thought on him. All right. Me and Walt were talking about this recently. I look at him and I see his ceiling as a prime Russell Wilson, a guy who can make the Houdini plays outside the pocket, similar body type, similar arm strength. And the bad part is similar personality quirks. I mean, he's a little full of himself coming in. There were some rumors some of his teammates didn't like him. And then there's also, he cried 3 times after games this year. He's a little emotional. Like, you like good fire out of a guy, but he's a little A.J. Brownish, T.O.-ish to me. I just worry. There's some concerns I have about him, but I would take him first if I'm the Bears anyway and roll. But I'm not as sold on him as some other people.
Fair enough. Meeker, you have number 2, the Washington Commanders. I assume they're taking a quarterback.
I think it is interesting because I think if they didn't change ownership and all this stuff, maybe they would think about trading back and collect more picks. But with new ownership coming in and trying to make a splash, you're just going to go for a quarterback. And really, it's up to 1 or 2 guys. And I'm just going to say that most of the press out there is saying Jaden Daniels is going to go number 2. So I'm going to stick with that pick. And I'm going to go with Jaden Daniels number 2. I understand what you were saying earlier. Like, he lost his job to Caleb Williams, and he's got 5 years under his belt in college, right? So he's got the experience. He won the Heisman Trophy. He's got the smarts. At least someone thinks that. A couple people think that, but we'll see how he translates to the pros.
He's certainly
got 4 years.
Good. Yeah, he's got a good size at 6'5" plus for sure, but they need a quarterback. Speaking of needing quarterbacks, Walt is up with the Patriots at 3. So this is the first draft of the post-Belichick era. Where is New England going at 3?
And so we decided that we weren't going to do any trade in this mock, but if we thought there might be a trade, we can touch upon that. So if Drake May is available, which obviously in this draft he is, I think this is the big potential landmine because New England that doesn't really have anything. And teams, in my opinion, others' opinion, whatever that's worth, believe that they'll be much more involved for Drake May if he's actually available at 3. So I think they would trade out of this, but since we're not trading, the pick's Drake May. I mean, he's the promise of Josh Allen light. He's got prototypical size and arm. He's mobile. He's got a lot of growing to do. And, who's going to be Josh Allen? But he holds the promise of someone who could be of that quality. So it's going to be Drake May at 3 to the Patriots, barring a trade down.
All right. Yeah, not a lot of good history recently for Carolina quarterbacks in the league, but May will certainly hope to buck that trend. Going to back to Rob. Up at number 4 is the Arizona Cardinals. Are they getting help for Kyler Murray at 4?
Yes, but they're going to be overwhelmed with trade offers. And again, since Walt said obviously we're not doing trades here, they may very well trade down. I wouldn't. They've been accumulating picks for 2 years for this rebuild. At a certain point, you stop accumulating picks, start making picks. And look, they're stuck with Kyler Murray. All right, they lost their two of their top receivers. I think their top receiver right now is Greg. I believe they re-signed him, so I think he's their number 5. Obviously, you take a generational talent. You saw the impact Larry Fitzgerald had on that organization. Marvin Harrison Jr.'s pick. I wouldn't trade down even if we were allowing. I think it's a no-brainer.
I think most folks agree with you. Local kid, Philly, St. Joe's prep through the Ohio State University. Over to Meeker for 5, Los Angeles Chargers. What are you thinking?
New coach, terrible year last year, just disastrous year. Lost Keenan Allen, Williams. I think it's a no-brainer if the Chargers do stay put and they don't trade, that they take the second best wide receiver on the board. And you don't go wrong too often with LSU wide receivers. So I'm going to say Malik Neighbors goes to the Chargers at number 5.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, so we're not going to be as betting focused at all on this particular episode, but one bet too that I'll mention was the order that you guys mentioned as being the exact order of the top 4 picks. That I took that at minus 145 on Bovada. I think that's the way it goes. So up at 6, we're back to Walt and the New York Football Giants.
Yeah, I don't think this is a great spot for the Giants because they need so much as well. Not going to jump into the trade down situation again, obviously, but they need a playmaker, and that's for sure. I mean, if they're going to wind up keeping Daniel Jones or being stuck with Daniel Jones, however you want to look at that, you got to give the kid a chance. They need a playmaker. There's one more elite wide receiver on the board. We're going to take him now, Rome Odunze, number 6 to the Giants out of Washington. But he's not special in any way, if you would, but he checks all the boxes. He's pluses on all levels. His number 1 attribute is contested catch guy with strong hands and a high point in the ball. And he's a guy who makes tough plays, dirty plays, if you would. So he's a receiver that is not going to look great, necessarily make huge plays, flashy plays, but he'll do a lot of dirty work, which is a quarterback's a good friend to a quarterback, a guy you could trust.
Makes sense. On the number 7 and back to Rob, we got the Tennessee Titans. A longtime coach, Vrabel, lost his job last year, so new coach there as well. Where do you see them going at 7?
Well, I think this is as much a no-brainer as the first pick. They need a left tackle and a right tackle. And Joe Walt, to me, and I mean, we're discussing this before, I don't really make big boards and rank players overall. If I did, it would be Joe Walt, Marvin Harrison be 1 and 1A. He's the most plug-and-play player in the whole draft at left tackle. He'll be there for 15 years. You know what I mean? He's just, I saw an amazing stat about him. Last year in pass protection, no sacks given up, and 0.9, less than 1% pressures. And it gets pretty good competition. Notre Dame doesn't play a cupcake schedule. And going back several years, in his years of starting, it's very similar numbers. I think he gave up 1 sack in his whole career. And 6'9", room to even get bigger. I think he's kind of light, but he's a physical specimen. He's quick. He's got good hands, long hands. I think it's a no-brainer. They need 2 tackles. So you're definitely going to take the best, and arguably in the draft, at a position in needs.
Yeah, if you need 2, you got to start somewhere with 1. So that would certainly make sense if he falls that far. All right, on to Meeker. I don't know if this is the team you hate the most, but certainly a division rival for your Saints, the Atlanta Falcons. They have a quarterback in there now and a new coach as well. What do you think they're going to do at 8 if they stay?
And they might trade too. This is a team that would probably, it would serve them well if they did trade down. But one of the needs that they certainly have is an edge rusher. They had 5.5 sacks last year from their outside linebackers, and they haven't really had a good edge rusher. I mean, can you name one? Like John Abraham, we're going back years and years from the last time they had a good edge rusher.
They'd have 1 year.
And I think was he there for a year too, right? Just 1 year.
He had 1 year and then he disappeared.
Yeah. So I think that's where they're. I would like to say, yeah, they like to get some more firepower and offense for Cousins, but they're not too bad when it comes to their skill positions. Their defense was not very good last year, and I think they need a guy like that, an explosive playmaker on the edge. So I'm going to go with Dallas Turner from Alabama, defensive end, 4.446 40-yard dash speed. That's a fast dude.
That's very fast for a big man. And the Falcons also drafted 8 last year. And if you listen to that podcast, I said there's no chance they draft Bijan Robinson. So I'm going to defer from guessing on where they're going this year. So Bears up again at 9, second pick in the top 10 for them. Walt, are they looking to help out Caleb Williams here, or are they going to go somewhere else?
Well, I mean, they helped him out in free agency. They brought in Keenan Allen. They traded for DJ Moore last year. So they definitely had some weapons. Cole Kmet, So obviously they're going to help him, but not here. This will be the second defensive player off the board. It's our buddy Eagle Rob. Not a big fan, but I am a fan of two-way players. Jared Verse from Florida State, high octane motor, power profile. He's got length. And like I said, he's a good two-way player. And a lot of people, Eagle Rob included, very much the twitched up factory. And they like guys to get upfield and make splash plays. You need players who play football, and that includes stopping the run and being gap sound, setting an edge. He's a very good two-way player. And that's a good start to go with Sweat on the other side. It was more of a burst around the corner, twitch kind of guy. So I think they would complement each other well. So Jared Verse.
All right. That brings us to number 10 and the New York Jets. Now, aside from 1 and 4, this is the slot I've seen one guy pegged at no matter what. But let's see, Rob, if you are thinking the same as the public.
It's probably not that guy, Chuck.
So throw some chaos into it. Who do you have for 10 at the Jets?
Yeah, it's not Brock Bowers, if that's who you were referring to.
That's who I was referring to.
It was tempting to take him. And if a Dunze or one of the receivers fell, I might have been more inclined to take one of them. But look, their biggest problem is offensive tackle. And they signed two veteran tackles, both of whom are good players. Tyron Smith, a great player, both very injury prone and up to over 30. And Aaron Rodgers said he plans on playing 2 more years. So if that's the case, they're going to need somebody next year. And I think I mentioned earlier in our pre-draft thoughts about Olu Fashanu as a pure left tackle, a kid from Penn State. I think that you're not going to find another tackle in the second round as good as this kid who can slot in at left tackle. And you have to assume, you hate to, but you have to assume Tyron Smith's going to miss games. He's going to miss games. I don't know if Fashanu could play the right side, but Tyron Smith's going to miss games. He can step in and play, and then next year, learning from a veteran like that, he could be ready to step in and be a franchise left tackle, but sure, he can pay dividends if there's an injury. They have no depth whatsoever at offensive tackle, and you can't rely on those two guys, so I'm going to go with him.
So that takes us out of the top 10. So we ended up with 2 defensive players taken in our mock, so that would not break the 30-year streak that I went back as far as. But that brings us to 11, and the Vikings, back to Meeker. Now, this is a team that if we had trades, we might have went to them because they got us another first-round pick for perhaps moving up, but who do you have going to Minnesota at 11?
What's interesting about Minnesota is because they have 2 picks in the first round, you might wonder at this point in time whether or not they're going to go for the quarterback at this number 11 pick, or whether they feel they're okay with waiting or of course trading if it winds up the way we're talking and they can't get into the top 5 or whatever. And Walt had mentioned earlier that he didn't think on a normal year with teams not as much of a need as a quarterback, wouldn't see J.J. McCarthy as a top 5 pick. They might trade up to get him if they really feel that they want him. But I think if he drops to 11, he's the guy that they're going to take. Now, I'm not a big J.J. McCarthy fan. I'm not really sure that his game translates to the pros. I haven't seen him do anything quite dynamic at Michigan. He makes the throws, but he's on the best team basically in college football last year. So you go from being the best team in college football to going to a team that's basically rebuilding. I'm wondering how that's going to look. And if Minnesota actually starts him in year 1, if they draft him at this position. But I think that because we're not making trades, like we keep saying, if he falls to 11, Minnesota's obviously got a big need at quarterback at this point. That's going to be your pick. But I'll be intrigued to see how he translates to the NFL. I'm not convinced.
I could jump in real quick. I'm sorry, Chuck.
Go for
I
it.
would say the landing spot for him, though, Juan O'Connell has a really good reputation as a play caller. They have Aaron Jones, they have Justin Jefferson, and they have Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. This team is ready to win with a competent quarterback who makes the big plays that are in front of them with a little athleticism. If he's going to succeed, this is the place to do it.
Yeah, and of course they brought Darnold in, so they have somebody with some experience. If they don't start him game 1,
he may end up starting. It might take him a while for them to plug McCarthy in. We'll see what happens in camp.
Now, I'm about to put J.J. McCarthy in the Hall of Fame. I didn't watch a ton of college football this year. I saw plenty of Michigan games. He never struck me as a first-round quarterback, let alone a top 5 pick like they're saying. Somebody might trade up to 5 to get him. Whatever. If he turns out to have a great career, good for him. But yeah, did not see that. But anyway, Vikings need a quarterback with Cousins gone, and they got a couple teams right behind them. that need quarterbacks too. So that would be the place to make that move if they like them. But on to Denver at number 12. The all but brief 2-year stint of Russell Wilson at the helm is now done for Denver. So they have a couple of needs. Walt, what do you like for Denver?
We're going to skip the trade back scenario. We're not going to get into it. But the number one defensive player on the board, sans his injury concerns, would be Laiatu Latu. He's top 7 pick. He'd be first defender off the board. So Denver's going to go here. Like I said, they're taking a risk, but there's a big gain here to score this player at 12. They talk about he has, from a scout's perspective, it's me reading, not me scouting anybody. Like elite, like maybe the best hand fighting skills they've seen in terms of flexibility and bend around the corner and instincts and just a relentless motor. So by all accounts, if he didn't have the injury he had, he actually retired, I think, for a year, about 3 years ago, but he's played 2 years injury free. He would have been, without a doubt, the number one defensive player off the board, maybe in top 7. So it's just a value pick here. A little bit risky, though.
All right. Number 13 is their division rival, the Las Vegas Raiders. New coach, although he was the interim coach last year as well, in Antonio Pierce. They have a bunch of needs. Rob, what are you thinking for Vegas at 13?
Well, it came down to right tackle, or corner. And J.C. Latham's just standing there with all six of them. But I'm thinking you can get a decent right. There's a lot of right tackle prospects in the second round. You can get one of them, a Patrick Poole or Jordan Morgan, possibly, if you didn't go earlier. You're not going to get a corner like Quinyon Mitchell. And that's why I'm thinking out of those two positions, the more elite talent that's available at 13 is Quinyon Mitchell over Latham. And Mitchell, I've never seen a player, a corner specifically, kill the offseason like he did. I mean, I'm a geek. I watch his Senior Bowl practices. He dominated every receiver there. I think Roman Wilson from Michigan got 1 touchdown on him. Other than that, he shut everybody down, but he has swagger. He ran, beside the Senior Bowl, where he was the most dominant player there all week, he ran a 4.33 and killed every workout at the combine. He moved up a whole round, I think, from the beginning of the pre-draft process to now. He was early to mid-second, early to mid-first. And at this point, I would have him best player on the board, regardless of position, and it happens to be a position of need for them. I would gamble I can get a decent right tackle prospect in a second. I'm passing up Quinyon Mitchell corner here.
All right. So I was not part of the draft order here, so I don't know if this was planned this way or it happened out by luck. But number 14, Meeker draws his New Orleans Saints.
It was planned that way.
Howie Roseman was not able to get their first round pick for this year, so now that they're holding on to it, where are they going to go?
Not yet.
Well, you have big problems on the offensive line in New Orleans. You have Ryan Ramczyk, who has debilitating knee problems, who may have to retire. We're not sure if he's going to play this year. You have the project with Penning, who didn't quite work out, and they feel like if he's going to have a shot to play in the NFL, that he's going to have to move more into the interior. So he's not their answer at left tackle. So previously to this pick, Rob mentioned the guy's going to be sitting there staring them right in the face, and that's J.C. Latham. So I think you're going to go for that kind of guy rather than some of the other needs that they have. And they do have some other needs for sure. I think you can go defensive back. I think you can go wide receiver, but most of the good wide receivers at this point are gone, even though there's definitely some talent out there. But I think that their biggest need, they have no depth on the offensive line. Pete might retire as well. So I think you're going to go J.C. Latham and take the best left tackle left on the board here.
All right. 15, Indianapolis Colts. Richardson hurt most of the year, but Gardner Minshew almost got into the playoffs, just falling short at the end. Walt, what are you thinking for Indianapolis at 15?
This is a sweet spot between value, best player available, and need. It's Terrion Arnold, cornerback from Alabama. Again, they see him as ideal size and length. He's a press corner who is noted for exceptional change direction skills and ability to track the ball. So they need a corner. They don't really have much there. I think they re-signed their top corner and they had a slot corner, but they have nothing on the other side except an undrafted rookie from last year still on the roster. So this is a big need. So Terrion Arnold, Alabama.
16, Seattle. Pete Carroll is gone, either by choice or voluntarily, not quite sure. But the new regime there starting this year at the coach's position. Rob, who's Seattle taking with 16?
This is a real tricky one. This is the hardest one for me because the two areas of need they have, there's not really a player that I would think is graded out at 16. So this screams trade down. And John Schneider's known for trading down. I think he's done it 5 times in the last 10 years at his first round pick. However, with no trades, it came down to defensive tackle or interior offensive line. And Jackson Powers Johnson was a guy I really considered. He could play center or guard. He's probably the best interior lineman. But I went defensive tackle Byron Murphy out of Texas. Probably the number 1 rated tackle. I'm not 1,000,000% sold on his ability to rush the passer. He didn't put up a lot of numbers, but he has traits. And you could see on their NFL coaching that he could become maybe a really good interior pass rusher. He's 6'1", 308, I think. So he's not huge, but he's quick off the ball. He just needs to convert some of his pressures into sacks. But I think out of the 2 positions with no trades, I think he's a better value than Johnson, who's more of a late first round pick. So I went with Byron Murphy.
Yeah, interesting. I heard some people mention him as a sleeper pick to maybe jump into the top 10, depending on how things fell. So that'd be value at 16 if he falls that far to Seattle. Over to Meeker, 17, Jacksonville Jaguars. Peterson might be on the hot seat after a disappointing finish last year. Who's going to Jacksonville at 17?
They have needs at both wide receiver and corner. And this was a little bit tough for me because when we were doing our draft today, we were texting back and forth. And I said, I think they can go either way. But I think their bigger need is a corner. One of their starting cornerbacks, according to the depth chart, is Ronald Darby, which a couple of you Eagle fans would probably know that name. So he's a starter right now on the Jacksonville Jaguars depth chart. So that tells me that they need a corner probably more than anything. They're going to go Cooper DeJean here or DeJean, however you want to say his name. I've heard some people say DeJean, some people say DeJean, out of Iowa. Big explosive corner with speed and tackling skills. The only thing that I've read about him that people are concerned about is that the bottom line is he wasn't tested very much in college. They didn't go to his side very often, and obviously plays in the Big Ten, so it's not like he's playing powder puff competition. But that might be the concern that they have about him. They maybe just haven't seen him on his ball skills enough in college to give him a real solid grade. But he's the second best cornerback that I'm reading on the board, and I think that's where Jacksonville goes.
Interesting. I've seen him linked to the Eagles if he falls that far, and I think he's coming off an injury too, right? I don't know if he was during the season or in the off season, but has some pretty impressive metrics from what I understand. At 18, we're going back to Walt for the Cincinnati Bengals. Still had a winning record despite Burrow's injury issues last year. Might be player 2 from getting back to the Super Bowl. Who do you think Cincinnati was going to add at 18?
So I had to fight the real urge to get Burrow another weapon in Brock Bowers. Spoiler for a little bit later. But we got to keep him healthy and upright. So we're going to go with Oregon State tackle Palisi Fuaga. They describe him as like a mountainous tackle. He's like 6'5.5", 338. And here's my favorite part of his scouting report. Plays with a borderline unhinged tenacity. So plays with balance. They think he can play both sides. So yeah, we got to keep Burrow healthy and upright. So we're gonna start with the tackle.
All right, tackle it is to Cincinnati. All right, number 19 is the Los Angeles Rams. Got into the playoffs, almost pulled up the upset against Detroit, but fell short. Rob, who goes to Los Angeles?
This was another sexy one because there's so many different ways they can go. I even thought about Michael Penix because I've heard some rumors. I've seen him mocked, but no, they drafted 2 kids on the defensive line last year. Both had ex-rookie seasons, Kobe Turner inside and Byron Young outside. But then you take Aaron Donald away, and I don't know if those guys would have, especially Kobe Turner would have had 9 sacks who doesn't play next to Aaron Donald. They need another Leon. I think add another more young juice to the line. And Walt knows I'm not a fan of tweeners, but this guy, again, I mentioned Quinn, I mentioned earlier, that's acing the Senior Bowl and the Combine. Another kid who moved way up in the draft, Darius Robinson. He's listed as an edge from Missouri. He's got a late first round grade. I've seen him mocked in the first round. He's more of an interior lineman, but he's a little small. He's 285. And that scares me a little bit, but he had a tremendous offseason. He had 8.5 sacks in the SEC last year as an interior rusher. I think you put him next to Turner. You use him mainly inside, maybe some, if you need him to play outside here and there, but as an inside pass rusher next to Turner, I think he's not going to be Aaron Donald. He's not going to have that kind of impact, obviously, but he can lessen the blow a little bit and keep that line flowing with multiple players in there, because I don't think those other two guys would have had anywhere near the rookie season they had without Donald there. And you got to try to, you're not going to replace him, but you want to add a player there with some upside and some juice. And he's a fire breathing dragon. He's a nasty guy inside for his size. Not a great run defender, but a really nasty first step pass rusher, speed to power. It translates. 8.5 sacks in the SEC for an interior guy is pretty impressive. And the way he looked in the offseason, I think he's a guy who's a rising player. He's ascending. And I think he would be a good pick for them.
All right, on to number 20, Pittsburgh Steelers, Meeker. Mike Tomlin keeps his streak alive and gets his team to the playoffs. Who are they taking at 20?
I guess before free agency, I would have thought Pittsburgh might take a quarterback here. But now with that situation they have going on, we don't know who's going to be the starter at some point in time, but they could use more protection on the offensive line. Their starting left tackle is Dan Moore Jr., which a lot of Steelers fans are not too thrilled about. So there's an offensive tackle out of Georgia, Amarius Mims, that might be your pick right here. I think they need a center more than they need an offensive tackle, but I think that they can hold out for that and get a center in later rounds. I don't think no one really grades that high at center to be taken at this point in the draft. This guy's a little bit of a project, as I hear, but he's a mountain of a man. I think he's 6'8", somewhere around 330 pounds. So I think the Steelers go offensive tackle here and take Amarius Mims out of Georgia.
Yeah, I saw Kuiper had him rated as
And
he thought the best pure right tackle prospect.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rob said something earlier, like some of these guys that their position is left tackle, that's maybe what they're being, their position in college. How they translate in the NFL might be completely different. So whether he ends up being a right tackle, whether he ends up being an interior lineman, we don't know. But I think that's the way that they're going to go because their depth on the offensive line is a little bit lacking.
All right.
And I don't know, the game plan that you have for a guy like, one other thing, the game plan that you have for a guy like Russell Wilson versus Justin Fields might also have something to do with it. I don't know what their plan is yet.
Basically, you got a year to evaluate either guy if they're going to be with you long term, and then go from there. So it'll be interesting what they end up doing and who gets more playing time, since it is meant to be a competition, I believe. All right, so number 21, Miami Dolphins. A lot of turnover on defense. Walt, are they filling a hole there, or are they giving us some help on the offensive side?
Yeah, they definitely have a number of defensive needs that are going to have a solid draft in the back end, at least in this world, because I could no longer look past Brock Bowers, who is pretty much a top 5 player in this draft in terms of talent. So they've described him as literally the physical anomaly. He's a good blocker. Literally, he's an explosive player, even from the tight end position. Like, he just destroys second level tackling. He just runs by it. He runs through it. He's the all around tight end. And look, from a big board perspective, I've seen him top 5, top 7 on just about any credible site you could find. You know, we're getting to the second half, but later, the last quarter, almost approaching the last quarter of the first half of the first round. Too much value in Brock Bowers.
Gotcha. All right. 22. I see the pattern here now, I think. So Philadelphia Eagles, we're going back to Rob. Howie doesn't usually stay pat. He likes to move, but for this, he's at 22. What are the Eagles doing at 22?
Well, first, if I hear rumors he wants to move up, I think that'd be a mistake. Move down. They have no picks between 53 and 120. I mean, and there's a lot of good players. I think that's a sweet spot of the draft. But I went all over I wanted Cooper DeJean, and Meeker took him, so that threw me for a little dizzy. I actually changed my pick. I originally picked Jordan Morgan, the offensive tackle. It could be a swing tackle. They lost Jack Driscoll. But I changed it later on. I thought about it, and I went with Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver from LSU, because for multiple reasons. Number one, they need a third receiver. Now, he's big. He's a boundary receiver. They can move Devontae Smith to the slot when he's on the field, and they got 3 killer receivers out there. The other reason is because A.J. Brown scares me now to the point where he may TO himself out of the city soon. And I really worry about that. I mean, he's unhinged. Yeah. I'm really worried. If they lose him, they're screwed.
You have to wonder what happened in Tennessee, right?
What's that?
You have to wonder what happened in Tennessee. He had 2 good years. He was a first-round pick on a rookie contract, and the Titans said, "We don't want you." You have to wonder what that had to do with
his
anything.
best friend now, and he's still fighting with him. So I don't know. Brian Thomas I think, has some of the highest upside of any receiver in the draft. One of the lowest floors, possibly, too, of the top receivers. Because, I mean, he was a one-year wonder. But 6'2", 209, 4'3", speed, 4.37, I think he ran. And untapped. I think he's, again, I mentioned the word ascending earlier. I think he's an ascending player with a tremendous upside and an insurance policy. In the short term, he's a third receiver they could use. In the long term, he might be their number one receiver by next year. Who knows?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. This is the other bet I made. I did say Eagles with their first pick would go with the cornerback. Lyman is the other high or low odds, I should say. I just, with Stoutland, he's the best offensive line coach in the league, maybe the best position coach, period. Unless they have a guy they really love in the first round, I think they've already hit some home runs with guys in the second and third round. I think they'll take somebody there, maybe, and let Stoutland develop them. They're not necessarily looking to go first round with
I
Lyman.
always said that wherever you draft an Eagles lineman, move him up around after a year with Stout.
Yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. All right, 10 picks to go. We got Minnesota back again on the clock for the second time in the round. Meeker, is this you have both Minnesota picks? Did that work out that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's not on purpose.
No, I know.
Both of them. So,
Yeah, no, that was random.
Yeah, I'm going to go edge here again. I'm going to go Chop Robinson from my alma mater. He's kind of the player in the mold of Micah Parsons. Maybe not as explosive as Micah Parsons, but has that kind of game. They lost Daniil Hunter, so they're going to need to replace that spot. Minnesota, like Rob was saying, like they have enough talent on offense. They're bringing in a quarterback. They don't have to draft more talent on offense. They have to get better defensively, and losing a guy like Hunter and his sack production needs to be replaced. So I think we're going to go with Chop Robinson, edge rusher from Penn State University.
All right. So if you haven't guessed already, Walt's going to get the Dallas Cowboys here at 24. Walt, they don't have a running back, right? So is this where they're going, or are they going to wait to get one?
They don't have a lot of things, but we got to go in order. So again, one more time, final time for the draft. I promise. They desperately need to trade down. They're going to make every effort, but you need a partner. So we'll see. In this case, however, ironically, literally, if the local media, the people in the organization are correct, this is their number one guy because he meets their number one need, which is an offensive center. It's Graham Barton from Duke. He literally has, the scouts believe, 5 position versatility. He has played 3 positions on the line in college: left tackle, left guard, and center. They believe he can play all 5 spots. It's also believed he's going to move into center, which is his best position, because his one drawback is he doesn't have the longest arms in the world. He lacks length to play on the edge in the NFL. So he would move into center and give them versatility, because, as we know, offensive linemen get hurt. So that gives them a jack of all trades as well. Again, they need to trade down, but in this scenario, there's no trade down. So it would be Graham Barton for sure.
All right, so 8 picks to go. Since we've covered everybody's favorite teams in the interest of time, we'll go a little more rapid fire with the remaining picks. But we're back to Rob, number 25, Green Bay. Where are they going?
Well, they're a Super Bowl contender, but they lost 2 of their best offensive linemen. They need a left tackle. David Bakhtiari's finally gone. I think the best player that slipped is Troy Fautanu from Washington, the offensive tackle. There's some question whether he can play left tackle. I think he can. And I heard somebody in the pre-draft process mention short arms. His arms are longer than Joe Wool. So I don't know how, short arms. I think he can. And worst case, he can kick inside. They need a guard too. So, I mean, I think it's an absolute must pick for them to take the lineman, and he fell. He's a higher value than this.
Yeah, now that would be a good value pick. All right, 26, Meeker, the other Bay, Tampa. Who's Tampa taking?
I'm going to go with center here at Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon. Did we lose Walt?
I think we did.
I believe we lost. Anyway, we lost Walt, but I'm going to go center here. I think they lost Ryan Jensen, so they could use some depth in the offensive line, and he's the best center on the board. So I'm going to take him from Oregon, and we'll move on to Walt's next pick. Is he?
Walt doesn't seem to be on the second. So if you have his 27, Arizona, second pick, first round.
Yeah, I have Nate Wiggins. That is Walt's pick for Arizona. I wrote him down, thank God, because I think he was the only one to keep track of this. But Nate Wiggins,
he very wise. And said he got tossed.
A very wise decision. Well, I didn't toss him, but I guess maybe his battery
I
died.
think I did.
All right. So 28 Buffalo, back to Rob. Diggs is gone. Is
It was
this a
between three wide
receiver?
receivers. Yeah, it was between 3 wide receivers, the 2 Texas kids and Xavier Legette from South Carolina. I heard some weird things about A.D. Mitchell, about his interviews, and that he has type 1 diabetes. He won't take his medication. Some weird things came out this week. I'll skip him. I'll go to the Xavier Worthy, who ran the all-time combine record 4.21. And he's might be the only guy in the draft Josh Allen can't overthrow.
Yeah.
So-
Now that would be a feat if he could do that for sure. But yeah, that was a blazing fast 40, obviously. All right, 29, Meeker, the hometown Detroit Lions hosting the draft. They just missed out on getting to the Super Bowl. So where are they coming back with at 29?
Yeah, I think they need more bulk on the defensive line. It doesn't have to be edge. They have Hutchinson, so I think they're okay there. So I'm going to go with Braden Fisk from Florida State on this pick. The one thing that I think that they need, they have a good pass rush. I think they're just a little bit lacking with stopping the run. And I think this kid will certainly help that situation.
All right, 30, we got the Baltimore
Walt.
Ravens, and I believe we got Walt back. So Walt, if you're there, give us who Baltimore's taking at 30.
I'm here. You can hear me?
I can hear you.
So we're at 30. Okay. Well, that was good timing. Baltimore needs base, rash, first round grading, tackle, Tyler Guyton. He was a product, but he's another guy, 6'7", 6'8", tremendous arm length. Right now, they say he's a plus pass protector. He can step right in and pass pro right now, but he's going to need a little work in the run game. But Baltimore, let's face it, they got a good track record of developing guys and making value picks here at this stage, or always seemingly at this stage. So Tyler Guyton's also a need, tackles a need, Tyler Guyton, tackle, Oklahoma.
All right, so that's Baltimore at 30. Back to Rob for number 31, the reigning NFC champion San Francisco 49ers. I'm not sure exactly what they need, so why don't you tell me where they should go here?
Well, their right tackle, Cole McKivitz, is a weak link on their offensive line. And Trent Williams is, 36? I think he's waiting to one more run at the Super Bowl. He might be done. So I think Jordan Morgan, who I mentioned earlier, is going to take with the Eagles. He's a right tackle who can play left tackle. So he checks 2 boxes. He possibly start at right tackle this year and be groomed to take over Trent Williams when he leaves. I think he's the most athletic tackle, the biggest upsides in the entire draft from a left tackle perspective. He's not a finished product. He played more right than left, but he has the talent to play left. And I think it helps them out possibly next year or 2 years from now when Trent Williams is gone.
All right. Yep, that would make sense. All right. And last and certainly not least, the 2-time defending champion Kansas City Chiefs. Big Red just re-upped his contract, so I guess he's not retiring. Meeker, who do you like for Kansas City?
Yeah, well, Kansas City, obviously their biggest need last year, we all know, is skill position, wide receiver. And I think that where they go here is Lad McConkey from Georgia, White Lightning, 4.39 speed in the 40. And that's going to be a huge help for them moving forward to grab a good young wide receiver that's got a lot of experience and a lot of winning that he's done at Georgia. So that's why I think they go and they address that wide receiver need. And it's just like the luck of the Kansas City Chiefs. A guy like that will fall into their lap at 32.
That's how it works sometimes.
Think about one thing, guys. The Chiefs, Mahomes has never had a slot receiver. Think about it. He's had all outside receivers. This kid's a slot receiver with speed and explosiveness. It's scary to think what he could do with a slot guy now.
And that's what Kelsey and Lockham with some athleticism, but he carved out space in the middle. He carved out that so they got somebody to take advantage of it that right off the scene. That's more problems, but hey, good for them.
Yeah, it's a nice problem to have.
Hope he bombs.
All right, we're going to wrap it up, but real quick, short answer. Where are you watching the draft? ESPN, NFL Network, or on some kind of internet stream with a bunch of goofs talking?
ESPN.
Meeker?
I got to watch Mel Kiper. I can't draft night without Mel Kiper.
The nostalgia tells me ESPN, but I think there's better analysts on NFL Network.
Walt?
I'll be honest, I have no idea. Whatever my brother puts on TV, I'll be at his house. I wouldn't, if you asked me what I watched after, I probably wouldn't tell you what network it was.
All right, man. So ESPN NFL Network will not be sponsoring us anytime soon. But anyway, that wraps up the special NFL draft episode of Broad Street Hustle. We'll be back later in the week to talk about the first 2 games of the Sixers series. and the Phillies progression up to this point. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for tuning in. And thank you again to our two guests for coming in tonight. And we will talk to you
Had a
soon.
blast.
Thanks for coming. Have a good night.